Hey guys, my name is Nero. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about how I got into reading at 21 years old. So just a little bit about my reading kind of background. I did used to read as a kid, but I never really read that much. I read like the Diary of the Wimpy Kid books, and like I never really read much chapter books or like full novels, mainly just Diary of the Wimpy Kid. And like comic books, I read the first book of like the Amulet series, but I never really read too much, mainly because I was scared of chapter books because they seem so daunting. I did read shorter chapter books. I think one of the most prominent series that I can remember is the Haunted Museum series. I'm not sure if anyone else actually read those books. Only at 21 last year in November, when I came across a Chris Pfizer video. Chris kind of reads his TikTok. I think I came across his TikTok and I saw him kind of talking about how he got into reading, and it was through a Red Rising edit he mentioned, but no, I just saw his video about that, and then I thought that if it could get him back into reading, then maybe it can get me back into reading. And at that point, I hadn't read a fiction book in a couple of years, I would say. And in this video, I'm just going to go over all these books that I've read since then, my thoughts about these books, and kind of what made me enjoy reading, and the things that I like and things that I didn't like. I'll kind of be giving you my review about them in a way. So yeah, let's get into it. So as I mentioned, the first book that I read was Red Rising, and this was the first fiction book that I read in a while, and this became a book that I really enjoyed. And you know, I wouldn't say it was a genre that I normally enjoy. I do enjoy kind of watching, the Maze Runner series. I enjoyed watching, the first Hunger Games book, and I felt like it fell within those kind of genres, more within Hunger Games. And I think it became a book that I wanted to read and wanted to find out what would happen to the main character and see how he would progress. And there were, great plot twists throughout the book. Obviously, I don't want to spoil it here, but it was an entertaining book. It was an entertaining read, and finished the book fairly quickly to my standards because I just enjoyed it. I read it on my Kindle as well. I would recommend it for anyone who kind of likes that genre and wants to maybe get into reading. It's worked for other people, or it's worked for me, so it could work for other people. So after reading Red Rising, I wanted to dabble into some classics, and I went to Indigo and I bought, they had a sale for 3 books for like $10, and I bought 3 classics, that being The Picture of Dorian Gray, Dracula, and Frankenstein. And The Picture of Dorian Gray was the first ever classic I read, and this still to this day is one of my favorite books that I've read. Just looking at my kind of notes I wrote down about the book, it was not too difficult to read. I was expecting it to be much more difficult because it was a classic book and because it was written over 100 years ago, but it was not too difficult to read other than a specific chapter 11. If you read it, you would understand. It's just very descriptive. It kind of shows a time jump, so it goes over a lot of things very quickly, but at the same time very slowly, because it's very descriptive. Oscar Wilde can write, and I think that's one of the things where I enjoy about Oscar Wilde, and I think if I went back and read it right now, I'd be much more appreciative of that writing. I think The Picture of Dorian Gray has some of the greatest writing that I've read so far, and it's just so poetic. Oscar Wilde could really write, and I read the censored version of the text, so I really want to read the uncensored version and kind of compare the two, because that is the original version of the text. And I definitely want to go ahead and reread it. I let my friend borrow it, so once it's back, I want to reread it one more time, or reread some passages, because it just had such great descriptive writing. The Picture of Dorian Gray is about this man who wishes he would forever stay young, while his self-portrait takes his kind of sorrows and his age, and his wish gets granted, and he sees his portrait grow old, and take on kind of all his guilt while he forever stays young, and that kind of makes him go crazy. So it's a great book. I really recommend The Picture of Dorian Gray. That's why I gave it to my friend to borrow, because the writing in that book is just, it's perfect. Then I read Recursion. This book is one of my favorite fiction books so far. This book is one of my favorite stories, I would say, or I would say my favorite story that I've read. This book is, you get dual perspectives of two individuals. I don't really want to say too much about this book because I went into this book blind, and I really recommend it. Going into this book without reading or hearing anything about it, because I was very surprised my first time in. And if you're going to read it, don't look up anything about it. But you kind of get two different perspectives. I don't want to spoil it, but I really like the romantic subplot between the characters. I won't say who, but between the characters, and it's just a very good book. After this, I read another book on my Kindle. I wanted to get back into some more classics, so I read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. And I wanted to read this book because I wanted to get into his larger texts, such as East of Eden, which I've still not yet read, but I wanted to start with something smaller, Of Mice and Men. Reading this book, it is a shorter book. It's a novella. You know, I think I went into the book with such high expectations to a point where when I was done the book, I thought it was going to be a little bit more than what I expected. And that's not to say that it's not a good book. The ending was so sad. I just think I was waiting for something to happen throughout the book, and there wasn't anything for me that really hooked me, but I don't think that's the purpose of the book. I think the purpose is to really send that message at the end. It's really hard to put it into words, but to send that message at the end. And, you know, we go through this entire book with these two characters. And, you know, it's really a story about friendship. And, you know, you see these two characters, and then, you know, it has a sad ending. But I personally wasn't the biggest fan of Mice and Men, so I wanted to give John Steinbeck another chance, and I read The Pearl, and this was a great book. This was another book that this was a book where, you know, I finished it, and also another novella, and I just said, wow, like, this book had really surprised me because I didn't really enjoy Of Mice and Men too much, and The Pearl just kind of was in a different ballpark for me. I think they are two very, very different books, even in the way that they're written as well. I just found The Pearl to captivate me within kind of the first couple pages, and I already knew within the first couple pages that it was going to be something I enjoyed way more. I have a lot to say about The Pearl. I wrote some notes down. To see Kino just slowly develop into the person that The Pearl was creating was really sad to me. To see what greed can do to someone, and to see how, you know, I was kind of rooting for him at the start until he started hurting the people around him. You know, he had set out to build a better life for his son, and, you know, it brought quite the opposite. But after The Pearl, I read the book In the Cafe of Lost Youth by Patrick Modiano. And this was another novella. I did not really enjoy this book. I personally think I'd need to reread this book, because when I first read it, I was reading it for a plot, because I also went into this book with certain expectations, expecting it to be, I think I heard a description about it, and I was like, it sounded very similar to the game Life is Strange, and when I read it, it is not similar at all to that book. I personally didn't enjoy it. It has won awards, so that's why I read the book. But I definitely want to revisit it and see if I can gain some more stuff out of it on a second read. After reading In the Cafe of Lost Youth, I read I think just a lot of the classics I've read I've really enjoyed. You'll hear me say one of my favorites a lot throughout this video, but I read White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Also another novella. I read a lot of novellas and short books. White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. an amazing book. This was the first book, if you saw my first video on my channel, where I talk about how I really fell in love with reading and writing. And I really took my time with this book. Even though it is a short book, I really took my time to appreciate all the writing, every single word, every single sentence. And this book really blew me away. Not even by the story, I think the story is good, but just by the writing in general and how Dostoevsky allows you to feel these characters even though you may not agree with them and where they're coming from. Allows you, really paints the picture in your head. Yeah, at so many points I had to put the book down just to take notes because the writing was just so good and I just had to reflect upon it. It was my first time also reading Dostoevsky and it met my expectations and exceeded them. It was very, very good. I made a whole video about White Knights and I went a little bit more in depth into it, but very good book. If you want to see that, you can check that out on my channel. And I also gave that book to my friend to borrow because it is just a great book and anyone reading it can take something out of the writing from it. And then I read and finished one of my first Stephen King books, Holly. This is I think the largest book that I've read. And this book was really surprising because I was not expecting what it was going to be like. But it is basically about a detective named Holly here. And she's basically investigating a string of disappearances with her main case being Bonnie Doll. And it's also a book where you have two different perspectives. So you have this perspective of the detective, Holly, and then you also have a perspective of two elders who are university professors. And I don't want to say too much about these two perspectives and really spoil it for you, but it is a great book. Really surprised me because I also didn't know anything about the book. I just knew that it was a newer Stephen King book, came out in 2023. My first time reading Stephen King. I want to read some more Stephen King because I enjoy the horror genre and I think he really did well with this book, and this is his newer books as well, so I definitely want to read something older from him. So those are all of the books that I've read. This is a longer video. I'll need to edit it because the raw footage is like 25 minutes of me just yapping. But I hope you guys enjoyed or took something out of this video. Maybe if it's a book recommendation, maybe if you heard about a description that you may have enjoyed. I really recommend reading some of these books that I mentioned. I recommend reading all of these books that I mentioned, even though I mentioned some that I may not like. There are always opportunities for other people to find value in things where I personally didn't enjoy, but you may enjoy. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.